Dr. Lina Anders was a name whispered with admiration. She was known as a dedicated, kind-hearted physician, and her patients adored her. She'd spent years carefully building a reputation in the community, balancing her career as a top pediatrician with her role as a wife to Michael, her high school sweetheart, and mother to their young daughter, Emily. Life seemed like a perfect picture. But as the days grew longer and the nights felt emptier, Lina was beginning to feel like something was missing, something she couldn't quite put into words. Then one fateful evening, she met Dr. Ethan Brooks. It started innocently enough. She was on the night shift, covering for a colleague in the emergency room. Her shift had been unusually chaotic, with a wave of patients filling up the waiting room faster than she could see them. Just as she managed to catch a quiet moment to breathe, Ethan walked in. He had an easy smile, and a charm that wasn't forced. He wasn't from her hospital, just a visiting doctor helping with an urgent case. "Rough night, huh?" he said, handing her a coffee. Lina smiled, grateful for the gesture. "You could say that," she replied, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. As the hours passed, their paths kept crossing. Between rushing from one patient to another, they exchanged fleeting glances and shared the occasional joke. By dawn, she felt she'd known him for years. There was a warmth to his presence that left her intrigued, an energy she hadn't felt in a long time. Weeks passed, and they started running into each other outside of work. A morning coffee here, a quick dinner there. Soon, coffee breaks turned into lunches, and lunches into long conversations about life, dreams, and regrets. "Do you ever feel like you're living a life that's perfect on the outside but empty inside?" Lina asked him one afternoon. They were seated in a small cafe near the hospital, the soft rain pattering against the windows. Ethan looked at her, his gaze thoughtful. "Sometimes, yes. We get so used to being what others need us to be. But I think we deserve to be ourselves, too." His words struck a chord. She found herself confiding in him, sharing fears and dreams she'd never spoken of to anyone else, not even Michael. Ethan was her secret escape, a bridge to a part of herself she thought she'd lost. One evening, as they strolled along the quiet riverbanks, Ethan reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The cool night air carried a stillness that mirrored her conflicted heart, torn between duty and the pull of something dangerously intoxicating. "It's late," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But her hand remained in his. Ethan turned to face her, searching her eyes. "Lina, you deserve to feel alive." In that moment, she knew the boundaries were blurred. She could no longer deny the force drawing her to him. But as much as she wanted to stay in that moment, she knew that every decision had consequences, rippling out into every part of her carefully constructed life. One evening, Lina returned home to find Michael waiting for her. His face was strained, his usual warmth replaced with a distant coolness that made her stomach drop. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity that spoke of a suspicion growing between them. "I called the hospital, and they said you left hours ago." She hesitated, the weight of the truth pressing heavily on her chest. But even as she tried to conjure an excuse, she knew the truth was etched on her face. "Lina, is there someone else?" Michael's voice cracked, his vulnerability raw and exposed. Her silence was answer enough. The pain in his eyes was a reflection of the hurt she had tried so hard to bury, the loneliness she'd felt that had led her to seek solace elsewhere. Yet in that moment, she was struck by the realization that the love she'd shared with Michael was still there, fragile but resilient. "I'm sorry, Michael," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I was just lost." Michael's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she saw him as more than just her husband. He was a man who had trusted her, loved her deeply, and relied on her in ways she hadn't realized. In hurting him, she had hurt herself, fracturing the life they had built together. In the days that followed, Lina took a step back from everything. She stopped seeing Ethan, choosing instead to face the consequences of her actions and the path forward. It wasn't easy. There were sleepless nights and uncomfortable conversations, but slowly, she and Michael began to rebuild. One evening, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "I can't pretend to understand why you felt the way you did," Michael began, his voice soft. "But I want us to work through this. For Emily. And for us." Lina reached out, intertwining her fingers with his. She felt the warmth of his hand, a steady anchor that reminded her of all they had shared. In his forgiveness, she found hope, and in her own vulnerability, she found a strength she hadn't known she possessed. With time, Lina learned to be honest, both with herself and with those she loved. She rediscovered the importance of communication, of nurturing the life she had with Michael, and embracing the parts of herself that she'd once neglected. As the months passed, the scars began to heal, leaving behind lessons etched deeply in her heart. Lina's journey was one of heartbreak and redemption, a testament to the fragile nature of relationships and the importance of staying true to oneself. Her story serves as a reminder. Sometimes, we lose our way not because we are selfish, but because we are human, yearning for connection and purpose. For anyone who has ever found themselves at a crossroads, wondering if they are living an authentic life, Lina's story is a call to reflect, to communicate, and to never lose sight of the love and commitments that define us. Lina's story illustrates the complexity of human emotions and the importance of empathy, self-awareness, and communication in any relationship. Through both her mistakes and her efforts to mend the damage, she found a renewed sense of purpose, reminding us that every mistake can be an opportunity for growth if we choose to face it with honesty and courage.